situation. He took a pitch in the back. He got beamed for crying out loud.
We used heart attack.
Managers on a Major League Baseball team don't make decisions. Credibility in this situation is worse than losing your job.
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor?
The castration of the Major League Baseball managers, we know it.
Ask me about my win.
Just 5 days ago, Major League Baseball had two proven World Series championship managers with the first name of Joe. Both are no longer at their respective posts. Just 5 days after Joe Girardi was relieved of his duties as the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, Joe Maddon, who won the World Series with the Chicago Cubs in 2016, was let go. A couple little takes on this. I believe that the proven Major League Baseball manager, you're seeing so few of them throughout the sport. You've heard me talk over the last couple of years about the emphasis on not only analytics, but information being processed through people outside of the dugout. You know, the front office, the information and data that's put together sets up the game plan for the manager to lead. And the ability for somebody like a Billy Martin or a Lou Piniella or an Earl Weaver or a Sparky Anderson. And I think of those type of managers because when you sensed that they were behind the bench, you knew that they had a very strong impact on the game. There wasn't a lot of data thrown their way. Whether the team won or lost, a lot of it had to do with the tactical things that they either did or they didn't do. Now, Billy Martin, would lead his team for the most part out of the cellar or into a victory formation. Look at what he did with the Twins in 1969. The Rangers, the Tigers, took the Tigers to the playoffs in 1972. And obviously he inherited a very good Yankees team, which is where he wanted to be all along. But think of the Oakland Athletics. The Oakland Athletics, who pretty much sold off their entire roster throughout the latter part of the 70s. One of the best teams up and down. You think of Vida Blue and Raleigh Fingers and Ken Holzman. But most importantly, Reggie Jackson and Gene Tennis, Burt Campaneris, Joe Rudy, Billy North. The depth that they had in that team, and the decision by Charlie Finley saying, "Hey, free agency, these players are going to make a lot more money. F this, I'm getting out of here." And the massive sale of the great Oakland Athletics team and the players, was underway. But Billy Martin in 1981, took a team that didn't have a lot of talent, was very young, and got them playing at a high level. And the reason that I bring this up is because there's always this dream scenario that happens when a manager is let go in Major League Baseball. And a lot of times it's when it happens during the season. You expect a jump start. You expect a little bit of I don't know if it's a little bit of nerves inside you that are just kind of happening uncontrollably. But the Phillies won a handful of games in a row after they let Joe Girardi go. I would expect the same for the Angels. The Angels play the Red Sox and then they play the Mets this weekend. I would expect them to kind of come out and play their best baseball. And the reason that I believe that that's going to happen is, the players, for the most part, support these guys that are behind the dugout. Sometimes there's tension. You hear there's a little bit of tension with the Miami Marlins right now. And, Don Mattingly, one of the probably more respected people throughout Major League Baseball. So you figure he's not the center of the problem. But, in the end, these players do look up and respect the person that is in charge, especially if it's somebody like Joe Girardi, especially if it's somebody like Joe Maddon, especially if it's somebody like Don Mattingly. Not only, their track record as a manager, but their respect throughout the baseball community as people. And the players who know that ultimately, because of the contracts that they signed and the amount of money that they're owed by their respective teams, they're not going to be the ones to lose their job over poor play. There's got to be a little bit of sympathy or remorse when their respective manager gets fired and loses their job. I mean, it's got to be a fact. The Phillies, who probably supported Joe Girardi's track record, he's put in a spot where the Phillies are expected to win. They don't win. Joe Girardi loses their job, and these players still have to go out there and play baseball the next day. There is sympathy for the manager that just lost his job, and these players are going to have probably an unprecedented amount of energy that's going to come their way, and they'll probably will play their best baseball because you know what? They know they just cost their manager their job. And the same thing's going to happen with the Angels right now. But the other element and the most important thing that I wanted to touch on when it comes to, the manager in baseball is the veteran manager who you saw kind of make a comeback a little bit. Joe Maddon continuously managed in baseball since he got the job with the Rays in what year was it? I think it was 2006. So he went from the Rays, eventually to the Cubs, and then of course to the Angels after that. Joe Girardi was out of the game for a little while after the Yankees let him go. Buck Showalter with the Mets right now, it was 2-3 years he was out of the game. So some baseball traditionalists have a feeling that, hey, maybe the older manager is coming back. But the older managers that do come back, the ones that have the respect throughout the game, the ones that have the track record, if you're going to put your resume on Indeed and say, listen, you managed in baseball for a long time, that would qualify you to be a major league manager. We think that that's a good thing, but I'm looking at 2 examples where it wasn't such a good thing, and that manager was probably under more scrutiny than the manager that wouldn't have had any experience prior to getting the job. And I think that's a big difference in the game right now. Yes, you could celebrate the fact that there's that there's managers that are coming back, that have experience, that have been in the game for a little while, and you're glad that you're seeing maybe, and I'm not going to say retreads because both Girardi and Maddon won themselves a World Series championship there by no stretch of the imagination a retread, but they end up getting their job because of the experience that they have. They've been in the game a while. They have the respect throughout Major League Baseball front offices, but most importantly, players. Players love playing for Joe Maddon. You'll see a lot of players that said that they liked playing for Joe Girardi. Joe Girardi's a little more intense. He's not afraid to be confrontational with players, which, you know what? You could lose a locker room with that sometimes. But when it comes down to it, the Major League Baseball manager with experience, you figure they would get a longer leash. The opposite of that is happening. Joe Girardi picks up the job with the Philadelphia Phillies a couple years ago with a team that had a lot of talent, was expected to win. We're in year 3. The Phillies haven't seen any winning or enough winning, and Joe's out of a job. Joe Maddon comes over from the Cubs, an Angels team that is disappointed for the better part of a decade. You think about the whole Mike Trout curse and the fact that he's basically been the best player in the game for the last 10 or so years, and the Angels have been in the playoffs one time in 2014. That's not Joe Maddon's fault. Joe Maddon's not responsible for Mike Trout's career and the fact that his teams, since Mike has been there, have only been in the playoffs 1 year. That's an organizational thing. They've been through a couple general managers. The owner's still been there. Mike Scioscia, who was their manager forever, was kind of run out. You brought Brad Ausmus in there for 1 year, let him go, replaced him with Joe Maddon. And a similar thing to Joe Girardi. The Angels didn't win. The Angels got off to a good start. I mentioned as one of the topics of my show, first time in baseball history, the Mets, Yankees, Dodgers, and Angels were all in first place at the same time. And if you're an Angels fan, you think that was eons ago. You figure that was forever ago. The Angels go out there and they lose 12 straight games. It's, demoralizing. And it makes you think it can happen to any team. The Mets and the Yankees and the Dodgers sitting there, driving their Cadillacs, living in a lap of luxury right now in first place in their respective divisions. Well, you know what? You could go through a bad stretch. There is some parity in baseball, and I think parity's made a little bit of a comeback in baseball this year. Have you watched the Pirates play baseball? Have you watched the Orioles play baseball? 2 teams that were expected to really be cellar dwellers, and they still very well may be, but they're playing competitive baseball. They got a chance when they're playing some good teams. So, the parity that's back in baseball, I think leads anybody to think that even the best teams can go through a rough time. And you're looking You're looking at situations in Philadelphia and with the Angels. Certainly the Angels, the first place team, it seemed like just a couple weeks ago, they were the cream of the AL West, and Joe Maddon's not there. But the reason is the more proven track record you have as a Major League Baseball manager now, the more you're going to be scrutinized. The more when a team hires you, whether it's Perry Minion or whether it's Dave Dombrowski or Sam Fuld, they bring you in there as the manager with your experience, your track record. You're expected to win. Sometimes it's not possible. The Philadelphia situation, I thought, was a little bit of a tough one. You got a team that's centered around offense. Yes, their starting pitching, I think, is good. I think they got a good starting pitching staff, not a great one. Zach Wheeler's an ace. Aaron Nola, to me, last couple of years, he hasn't pitched like a number one, but he's a solid number 2 or 3 in your rotation. You got Zach Eflin and Kyle Gibson, and I give Joe Girardi some credit for the development of Ranger Suarez. I think they got 5 good starters there. The problem with the Phillies is defense. They don't play any defense whatsoever. They're like the Brooklyn Nets of Major League Baseball. You got Bryce Harper, Real Muto, Castellanos, Schwarber, Rhys Hoskins. They're supposed to bludgeon the ball to death. And in a time where offense is a little bit down in baseball, teams that are offensive centric are going to have to do some other things. And that means the Phillies at some point have to catch the ball. But that, to me, ain't Joe Girardi's fault. He didn't assemble that team. Joe Girardi's trying to put Roman Quinn in for defense because he knows that Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber can't be counted on to catch the ball late in the game. And, maybe Roman Quinn makes a catch that one of the other guys wouldn't make, but the bullpen blows the lead and Roman Quinn's spot comes up in the batting order, then it doesn't look very good. But I look at, and the most important point I want to make about this, as you watch the Angels drop their 13th straight game, first with their new manager, first without Joe Madden. Now, the proven manager, I think, gets less of a leash than the manager with no experience. Phil Nevin, Rob Thompson. I think of Pat Murphy when he took over the, what was it? Was it the Padres that one year? You look at guys that come in with no Major League Baseball manager experience. You say, hey, if they do well, then maybe he's got a career for himself. Look at Brian Snitker with the Braves. If the Braves didn't have a lot of success and win consistently, and of course eventually win a World Series championship like they did in 2021, Brian Snitker wouldn't be there for long. And when you look at Brian Snitker and you say, hey, he's a World Series championship manager, does that make him a great manager? Well, it kind of puts him in a different echelon, at a different pedestal. Yes, Ned Yost won a World Series championship. Mayo Smith won a World Series championship. Joe Altobelli won a World Series championship. Does that make them great managers? Hank Bauer won a World Series championship as a manager. Johnny Keane. Johnny Keane was fired after winning the World Series with the 1964 St. Louis Cardinals because he won a World Series championship, got the job with the proven winners, the New York Yankees, and the Yankees started probably their worst stretch in the history of their franchise. Now, you could disagree. You could say the worst stretch in their franchise history was somewhere between the years of 1980 and 94, 93. And remember, the Yankees won more games than any team in Major League Baseball in the decade of the 1980s. So for those of you that are like, oh, the dreaded years of the 1980s with the Yankees, they were pretty bad in 89 and 90 and 91, a little bit of 92. But most of the 80s, they were winning 85 to 90 games, finishing second place in the American League East, which, by the way, the expanded playoff format's the way it's set up, they'd be in the playoffs the majority of the time. And maybe they get to another World Series or two and win a couple. But, to me, that's the furthest from the point that I'm trying to get at here. You're seeing more, less decision makers and more instruction followers taking jobs as Major League Baseball managers. And if you're a good bench coach, I think that's a good prerequisite to becoming a Major League Baseball manager, because you process a lot of information and you got to be a good listener. You got to handle data pretty well. And the data which continues to come through the front office onto the field and determining the moves that are made within the game. You know, the Joe Girardis, the Joe Maddens, even the Buck Showalters. And listen, a lot of people are out there wanting to give credit to Buck Showalter. I have no issue with it. I give Buck a ton of respect. He's done a great job in that clubhouse with the Mets. I think part of it is some of the players that have been brought in there. I think there's a little bit of a change in a clubhouse culture with the different players that are there that have blended a little bit better than the players of 2021. And Buck deserves credit for that. But to say that Buck is managing this team, making all these decisions, yeah, he's processing the data well. At some point, the Mets are going to lose some games. And if they do, does it look like Buck's not doing his job? Let's say the Mets drop 13 games in a row. Could happen. Like I said, parity exists in baseball. You know, the Mets are playing good teams the majority of the time. They've played, you know, they've won the majority of their series. If you look at it, I think there's just the two series, one against the Giants, one against the Mariners, that they lost all season long. They even split the Dodger series. So at some point, I think they're going to go back. You know, the bell curve kind of flattens out, and they'll have some rough times. You know, it doesn't mean they have to get to 500. But, you know, this thought that Buck Showalter is changing the whole curve when it comes to the perception of Major League Baseball managers, I don't know. How much do you quantify what Buck has done in that dugout, in that locker room, and within that team? How much of an impact is he having on the day-to-day decisions and the inning-by-inning decisions that are made over the course of the game? And he's going to take all the credit for it. You know, he's got his bench coach, Glenn Sherlock, who's running information back and forth between the analytics staff and the front office. The iPads are saying, hey, you know, the hitters are playing here. You know, the manager has no control over the defensive positioning. The defensive positioning is set on cards, and, you know, the manager says to the center fielder, hey, move a couple steps to the right. He sticks up his middle finger and says, I'm going where the card says. You're not my boss. That's Major League Baseball defense now. There's no manager in baseball that has any control over that. But listen, I like what Buck has done, but the reason that a lot of people are high on Buck Showalter is the Mets are winning. And you look at a team that is in first place by more games than anybody in baseball right now, you start to kind of believe that the team is good. It doesn't look like they're doing a lot of stuff in mirrors like I think you saw last year. Certainly you saw at the beginning of, the 2018 season, Mickey Callaway's first year when the Mets went 11-1 to start the season. It just didn't seem real. It seemed like Fugazi, you know, a little bit like that. So I was thinking about the Utah Jazz and the decision by Quin Snyder, their head coach, to walk away. And I think, you know, you look at something and you say, hey, from a national basketball perspective, you know, you're thinking NBA Finals, Warriors, Celtics. To me, I think these are really the two best teams in the finals. You got two deep teams, two teams that play defense. A series that I expect to be very competitive as we get set for Game 3. You know, am I going to spend any time, or is it any time necessary to talk about the Utah Jazz? And the Utah Jazz, listen, they're not a huge national team. They're not LA, they're not Boston, they're not New York. Certainly not, they don't have the star powers, guys like Steph Curry. But, you look at the Jazz, and they've been a very consistent team over the last 5 or so seasons. A team that, you've heard about some disgruntlement or issues between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. I don't believe as much into it. Now, listen, this could be a whole story. There could be a legitimate beef between the two star players on that team. But a lot of it's centered around, COVID and Rudy Gobert touching all the microphones and everything, and then getting diagnosed with the coronavirus. And, Donovan Mitchell, apparently, amongst other players, were not happy about that. That was actually out in the public. And sometimes I think the media takes certain things. So I think the media likes to blow stuff up and say, hey, there is a story, there's a beef between the two players. And maybe there is. Maybe they don't like each other. But like Sandy Alcantara of the Miami Marlins said the other day, you're not always going to like your teammates. You're not always going to get along with your teammates. You know, you're out there with the unified goal of trying to win. You know, and in this case, we're talking about basketball. I'm pretty sure any differences that Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert have, they could check it at the door when they come into the stadium because they gel pretty well on the court together. They play pretty good basketball together on the court. In fact, the Utah Jazz, from probably about a 1 through 8 or 1 through 9 grouping, run out a pretty good, consistent team. The only problem is the Jazz over the last handful of seasons have been anywhere between a 3 and a 6 seed. They're guaranteed if they don't lose in the first round, they're going to lose in the second round. And they haven't been as good as those other upper echelon teams in the Western Conference of the National Basketball Association. And obviously, you've watched the Western Conference over the last year or so go from being a very deep conference to a not so deep conference. You had the Los Angeles Lakers at 13 games under 500 this past year, competing within the last couple games to play in the play-in tournament. You had multiple teams get into the playoff tournament, the play-in tournament. The New Orleans Pelicans getting in there as the 8th seed with a losing record. The depth of the Western Conference is not what it was before. And the Utah Jazz, they're kind of still stagnant. You know, Dallas kind of took that step when they made it to the Western Conference Finals. Good for them. That's kind of where Utah envisioned itself. I think it's where the Denver Nuggets envision themselves. If you heard their owner, the expectation is that they're going to compete for a championship next year, especially getting Michael Porter and Jamal Murray back. And obviously you got Jokic, you know, the great player that he is, the 2-time MVP. And the Jazz have never taken that step. But I think the decision made by the head coach, which, by the way, you're talking about a coach that's well respected throughout the sport, not just through his own players, but throughout the league. There's places like New York and LA that are like, hey, if this guy frees himself up, we'd love him to take over and be our head coach. And he walks away, he abruptly resigns. I think that hurts him. And I lose a little respect for Quin Snyder, who inherited a team. Now, listen, the team hasn't changed that much. And maybe it's time for a little bit of a revolution down there in Utah. Maybe it's time for Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert maybe to go their separate ways. I don't disagree with that completely. But it's kind of exacerbated or quickened by the decision by Quin Snyder to walk away. And I think he bailed on his team. And is he going to get another job in the NBA? Sure, if he wants to. I mean, any opening that's out there, I'm sure there's teams that are considering firing their head coaches to go out there and hire Quin Snyder. He's a well-respected coach. But I think it's a little bit of a disappointment to that team that has busted their ass the last couple of years. Yes, they can't get over the hump. And instead of sitting there saying, hey, I'm going to be there with you and fight with you, you know, this kind of reminds me of some of the things you see in the world of college football and college basketball. You know, coaches have success in some cases, smaller schools, but in other cases, less nationally renowned schools. You know, Mario Cristobal goes from Oregon to Miami. You know, Brian Kelly goes from Notre Dame to LSU. And you're talking about really good programs that they're leaving and the kids that are there. They say, this is how much the coach thinks of us. He said he was in our corner. He said that he was the first one in the defense mechanism as we go to virtual war with the opposition. And he's bailing on us. This is how little he thinks of us. I think you think of the same thing when it comes to Quin Snyder and the Utah Jazz. And some people may say, well, the Utah Jazz, they're not a national team. They're not the Celtics. They're not the Lakers. They're not the Knicks. And the NBA and the whole hope that the major markets are involved. And you got Boston in California in the finals. And there's this thought that, hey, Donovan Mitchell, maybe he goes to the Knicks and the Knicks get better and the league gets better. I don't know if the league is so centric around its major cities anymore. He used to say, hey, it's all about the Lakers and the Knicks and the Celtics. You've seen Golden State do the things that they do. Toronto Raptors won a championship a couple years ago. LeBron has, what he did with the Heat, won a championship with the Cavs. Yes, he's with the Lakers now, but LeBron with the Lakers, and they don't make the playoffs. Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook all together. James Harden was with the Nets with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Didn't work out well. I don't think it's more, and you look at the NBA, ESPN tries to do a good job of, in their minds, pitting the stars against each other. Is it Steph versus Tatum in regards to the NBA Finals? And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that does appeal to the kids. Younger basketball fans are real fans of the players. And I think it's less of a market thing in the NBA as it is about the star players. They buy the players' jerseys. They are big Steph Curry fans and obviously Greek Freak fans and in some cases Tatum fans. But, the big star players of the NBA, I think they follow them wherever they go. Not necessarily whether they're playing in a big market. But, the Jazz, I think you're going to expect to see a different team this year. Does it mean Donovan Mitchell is definitely out? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we're still in the NBA Finals. Free agency hasn't started yet. The prospects of what the draft's going to look like. You're hearing, snippets about some of the top players out there right now. That's all stuff to talk about after the finals. I'll leave you on this. Golden State, Boston. I think you're looking at a 7-game series. Do I think that there's one team that has an advantage over the other? And I'd be concerned if I'm Draymond Green. I think Draymond Green is going to get thrown out of one of these games, and I've said this before. His continuous bitching and complaining to the officials, even when he's right, all it's doing is just putting a friggin' bullseye on his back. One of these officials is going to get tired of him. He's going to get thrown out of a game, and the quarterback of their offense, the leader of their defense, is going to put that team in a rough spot. And that's why I give the advantage to the Celtics. I could see the Celtics winning in 7 games, and that's going to be my pick. This is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPLA.com, by St. Aloysius Church in Jackson, New Jersey, by Two Ways, One Passion Food Truck located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We'll be back with you. I think we're going to do a show on Monday, another edition of the Pass Ball Show. You can follow the show on Spotify, on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and of course videos on YouTube. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.
Chris Bryant was on the Chicago Cubs roster opening day.
I have many leather-bound books. My apartment smells of rich mahogany.
Why don't you give it all or a majority of it to the team that wins the freaking World Series?
I was going to listen to that, but then I just carried on living my life.
Now they come out as the biggest Major League Baseball manager apologist.
It'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Because hitters are going out there saying, I'm either going to hit a home run or I'm going to strike out. And if I don't get a pitch that I feel like I can drive out of the park,
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
especially you prospect fours and hoarders, are going to be a little pissed off at me when I say this. There are only 2 managers in baseball's Hall of Fame who have losing records. One of them is the iconic Connie Mack, who you could say, in spite of winning 5 World Series championships as a manager, could be in as much as a pioneer. And what side of the spectrum they're on. Were they pitching? Were they batting? If your favorite team was pitching and a ball got inside to hit a batter, there's no way it could have been on purpose. But if you were a fan of the team that was batting and a ball got inside and hit somebody or went behind somebody's head, absolutely 100%, unequivocally, that pitcher was throwing at. They put their tail between their legs and decided they're going to do exactly what they're told. You damn well right better give him a contract extension. You damn well right better make him the manager over the next series of years.
35 years ago, I could have loaned your parents the money for an abortion.